I'm not sure if you can hear me, but I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Thank you.
I call the Joint Assembly School District Facilities Committee committee meeting to order at 12:02 p.m. on April 17th, 2023. And I understand that Ms. Gladachevsky, who is on Zoom, can hear us, so that is good. I will read the land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge that the city and borough of Juneau is on Tlingit land and wish to honor the indigenous people of this land. For more than 10,000 years, Alaska Native people have been and continue to be integral to the well-being of our community. We are grateful to be in this place, a part of this community, and to honor the culture, traditions, and resilience of the Tlingit people. Gunalshish. Ms. Hendricks, will you please note the roll? And I think for purposes of the roll, can you say who's not here? Ms. Wall.
Ms. Wool is not in attendance.
And I believe Ms. Wall is not present and currently Mr. Muldoon, but sometimes Mr. Muldoon is on Zoom. Hi, Will. And Ms. Gladachevsky is on Zoom. And I think that's it. Super. Are there any changes to the agenda? Are there any edits to the minutes? Do I have a motion for approval of the minutes? Madam Mayor?
I approve I'm not used to this seat. I move we approve the minutes for February 3rd, 2023 and ask for unanimous consent.
Seeing no objection, we will move on. There are no items for action. This is the second largely informational meeting, helping us set the stage for the work that we'll do this year. But before we move on to informational items, I want to extend my gratitude to Katie Kester for doing a really bang up job of putting all the information together for this meeting and for managing it and for setting the pre-meeting. So thank you so much. I think it's really making it happen, Katie. Thank you. The first item is just a summary of that February 3rd, 2023 meeting. I just wanted to kind of go through that so that we're all on the same page. We discussed the charter and what the charter charges us with, and there's a memo to that effect in today's packet as well that gives a little more information. We talked about the declining enrollment over time and the projection for declining enrollment and the fact that we have an aging population in Juneau. We talked about the funding formula and impacts of closing or consolidating schools. It's not just an easy, simple formula. Touched on childcare, and we touched on procedurally how the assembly and the school board make decisions, and we'll go into many of these again further at today's meeting. Does anybody have anything to add to that summary? Am I missing anything? I don't see anything. Ms. Kester, would you like to take us into item number 3, procedure and decision making in the context of CBJ charter and Juneau School District mission?
Thank you very much. On page 8 of your packet, you have a memo that really tries to build on the work of the last meeting and some very good points that were brought up about needing to kind of lay the groundwork on how this committee will make decisions and the values that will drive those decisions. So it would be the intention that this group could agree on the 4 bullet points in the end of this memo. And so just to briefly walk you through that, those 4 bullet points, procedures and decision making. That's everything from Robert's Rules of Order to how the committee is staffed. And because this committee is called out in the charter, it is also subject to the Assembly Rules of Procedure. And that document does a really good job of establishing those logistics. And I did, in an effort to keep your packet manageable, I included links to all of those documents in the packet. So you'll see a link at the bottom of the page. So kind of formalizing as this committee that's bringing two different ways of operating together that it will acknowledge. It will acknowledge operating under the CBJ rules of procedure for standing committees as outlined in Resolution 2976. So probably what I'll do is just walk through these bullet points briefly and pause for questions and discussion from the committee. All right, seeing none on the first bullet point, the second question that was brought up as the last meeting is a little bit more roles and responsibilities. So what's the school district's responsibility? Who does the school district answer to? What's the assembly members' responsibility? And so just to articulate that, when you look at the charter, the work of this committee is advisory. So it's advisory to the assembly and advisory to the school board. So those binding decisions that are made at that level. So this body will not make any binding decision. They will only make a recommendation to respective bodies. So I'll pause there.
The one thing you can see at the bottom of page 8 are the sections from the charter that talk about the roles of the assembly and the school board. And it was interesting as I dug in further. One, it doesn't say anything about closing or consolidating schools. It says that the school board shall make recommendations to the assembly concerning the necessity for school construction and other capital improvements, etc. And then the assembly makes final decisions. And I think it's also important, it's important for me to acknowledge, and I think it's important for both bodies to acknowledge that we are two separate and distinct bodies, two elected bodies. So the school board is an elected body and the assembly is an elected body. And the assembly holds the purse strings. And so that gives the assembly some control, you might say, over the school board decisions, but it doesn't make the assembly sort of the boss of the school board. We really are two distinct bodies that are elected by our population. And I think that was really clear. That really helped clarify for me our respective roles. So the charter doesn't make it easy for us to decide how we're going to work together. That's up to us. It says you'll work together on this, but it doesn't give us basically anything more than just that. And I found that clarifying.
All right, and that ties right into the next bullet point, which is the CBJ Assembly has the final say in all matters concerning school construction and capital improvements. And that's pulled right out of section 13.8 capital improvements. So, the flip side of that is the school district has all the authority in operating decisions and operating of Juneau schools. So just to restate what is in charter, any committee discussion there?
Mr. Holtz.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate us having the chance to go through this. I also find 13.9 a little bit entertaining when it says the board, unless specifically transferring such responsibilities, like that was really our option for you to clean our schools. But I'd like to, I'm being a little bit facetious there, but I think that's that it just shows that we're operating in your buildings, essentially, right? And that we have this shared responsibility that's manifested. I think it's helpful to talk about how that actually looks on a day-to-day basis. We are responsible for minor maintenance. So we budget with the base student allocation funds from the state and that the city matches a certain amount of resources to provide regular maintenance. And this has been an issue that I don't know recently, don't recall it conflict, but there is a little bit of a gray line there is where what is minor and what is not minor. Especially when we've evolved from the way we used to really manage our schools, which is sort of let the schools decay, keep them up sort of operationally, decay, but don't defer major maintenance until we could have a bond to then fund a major repair. That was a viable alternative for us when the state provided a funding source that allowed the city to be reimbursed for 70% of those costs. Since then, the item of regular maintenance becomes a little more challenging because you allocate to us a certain amount of funds for the purpose of that maintenance. It's been about $1 million in the last several years. And then we decide jointly, because the city has to concur with that. Well, I think the practice has been you give us $1 million and you trust us to spend those on major maintenance, and then the city engineering department is in the room when those expenditures are made. We suffer from not having, suffer, I don't know if that's the right word, but I think the $1 million, as we've looked at in the past, when we've looked at these in this committee, we've identified that the level of funding, if we were just look at the total value of all the buildings, would be many millions more per year in order to maintain the buildings in some sort of more typical, maintenance schedule about some percent of the overall value. But we've only been able to operate with, or we've operated with, I don't want to say but, because I don't want to put any sort of weight on whether it's sufficient or not, but we've operated with about $1 million a year for the last several years. And I think part of what this gets at is, I think this particular group has primarily, at least in my time on the board, was primarily dealt with when we were to do remodels, full-on remodels of our schools. And what this group hasn't dealt with, because you've delegated that to the school district, is you've given us as assembly a certain dollar amount to allow us to prioritize those items that fall under, and I want to use the words, major maintenance and rehabilitation, which is about $1 million a year. I think it'll be, as we talk about what the role of this committee is, I think we should be clear if we're going to continue to keep those two separate, is that this group is going to focus just on major rehabilitation, or if we're also going to start to discuss, if this is the place to discuss, is the $1 million allocation per year that we get through your CIP sufficient to meet our ongoing major maintenance and rehabilitation? So I said a lot there, but I hope I just want to raise that general question. I think this is the right time about what our responsibilities are, because it seems to be that there's something in the middle that we've delegated essentially to the school district with a certain amount of money. I think it works for us, but the amount of funds there isn't sufficient to meet our major maintenance needs.
Thank you, Mr. Holst. Are there other members of the committee that have comments on that? And Ms. Henricks, I can't see Mr. Muldoon or Ms. Gladishevsky, so if they raise their hands, can you let me know? Oh, okay, great. And Mr. Holst, Madam Mayor.
Thanks. I know we give $1 million to the maintenance, but I also thought we gave in our CIP, we also give money for certain items. And I'm trying to think of that. We just did a boiler, but maybe I'm confusing that with the fire department. It's hard to say.
Mayor Weldon, we do named projects also in the CIP or through bond initiatives. The most recent example are the 3 roof replacements for schools. So that would be additive to the $1 million in deferred maintenance annually.
Thank you. And I think that the last several years have been anomalous in at least recent history, in that the state has not stepped up to fund their 70% portion for years now, as we all know. And I think that you know, as everyone kind of holds their breath and lobbies and does everything we can to get the state to live up to that responsibility, we also know that major deferred maintenance at the schools is the needs are only growing bigger, and they'll continue to only grow bigger. I think another role of this committee, as I see it, is to, and Ms. Kester, I know we've looked at the CIP together, but to actually work together to prioritize the list of major maintenance needs, so that when we manage to do some bonding for some of those major maintenance needs, the assembly and the school board have a list that at least this committee has agreed upon, and that we could forward that agreed upon list to the assembly and school board. So I think that's another role of this committee. Thanks. Really good comments. Thank you. Mr. Holst.
So, and Ms. Sorensen reminded me just from because I've been on the board for 9 years, my understanding was that this joint group focused on bond initiatives primarily. And we call it at the school board project team, because this is when there's like a major project that we ask the citizens of Juneau through the assembly to support. But it hasn't been, we haven't focused on this group on the $1 million, right? That those funds have been given to us through the assembly, and we leave that to our own facilities committee to program those resources and spend those resources. I'm not exactly sure where in the process you formally approve that. I don't know if you give us the $1 million and that's all the approval that is, but we program that without coming to this body. And I think that's working fine, but that's just to kind of keep us fresh as to what we're working on. And if we continue that way, then this group would be about the roofs primarily, or if we were to propose, you know, like Mendenhall River, which is a school that we know could use some major investments, something like that. That would be where this body would come in if we're going to sort of continue the way it's been operated for the last couple of decades.
Madam Mayor.
I don't know about the last couple decades, but when I became mayor and just kind of put this committee together, it was again because it seemed like the school district was coming to us either in the middle or after with capital improvement projects that we weren't really ready for. And the idea was to blend the projects with the help of Public Works. And so we could start making these bite-sized projects instead of looking at major renovations that may or may not be we may or may not be able to do. As far as bonding, I think that we could look at that in the future, but I know there's several of us still hold out to see if the state will ever do their part and not put it on the backside of the municipality.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So Madam Mayor, I think that Mr. Holst is talking about that, you know, $1 million a year, and the school board works with the facilities committee and engineering to decide where that goes. Whereas bigger projects then come to this group to make recommendations. Are you agreeing with that, Madam Mayor? I wasn't quite sure what.
Yes, I'm agreeing with that, but at the same time, we have asked them to make their big projects into smaller projects so we can put them in the middle of our CIP budget and try to start tackling them that way. Instead of $30 million for a school, cut it down to, because that's where I'm getting a boiler. There's a boiler I'm pretty sure needed at Mendenhall River, but I could be wrong. Yeah, but Ms. Olin is agreeing with me. So someone's agreeing with me today. Anyway, so bite-sized chunks that we can do rather than huge multi-million-dollar chunks.
Super. Ms. Olin, did you have a comment, or were you just agreeing with Madam Mayor? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, excellent. I really appreciate it. Ms. Kester.
Chair Hale, so the last item to kind of for the group to agree on for rules and procedures are kind of the core values driving the decisions that you will make, the advisory decisions that you will make through this committee. And I think that it's important to read into the record the mission of the Juneau School District. This is pulled from the strategic plan, which is also linked in your document. But in Juneau, we partner to provide each student with meaningful, relevant, and rigorous learning experiences in order to graduate diverse, engaged citizens ready for a changing world. And as a parent, I love that mission statement. The last bullet, again, just says that the committee considers the facility needs of the district to meet its educational mission within the context of finite resources for capital construction.
Thank you, Ms. Kester. Ms. Sorensen.
This is just for the printed record. I'd like to fix the spelling of learning, please.
That's funny, we missed that. In our relatively rigorous quality control. Thank you. That's right.
The product of the Kenai School District system, my apologies.
So the recommendation for this memo, and again, I don't see this necessarily as an action item, maybe an action in the sort of in the negative. Just making sure that the committee, that there are no disagreements with the general layout that we have provided here. And I'm not seeing those, and Ms. Henricks, there are no hands raised. Okay, super. And Mr. Holst.
So if I could just make a brief comment, just the last sentence, the joint facilities considering the facility needs of the district to meet its educational mission with the context of finite resources for capital construction. All agreed. I just know that, and I know that tonight, the assembly is going to be talking about a deficit in community schools, for example. And it just reminds me that we know that the schools are a resource, not just for the students, right? That is their primary purpose. But I think we all want as a community that these facilities are in a state and available so that the amazing things that this community wants to engage in, that there is a place to do that as well. And, I think we keep that in mind when we, talk about some of the needs that we have as well. We know that the facilities the sports facilities, they may be primarily targeted at our youth activities, but we know that those are all used for other needs and other groups and private clubs, et cetera, in our community. The high school just being a great resource for the symphony and other items. I just want us to keep that in the back of our minds, is that part of what we are also trying to do is not just is to have facilities that can be accessed by our community. That's good for the community. It's also good for the schools when the community has a chance to get in our buildings and be engaged and understand what we're trying to do education wise. So just noticing that maybe it's a little more narrow than it needs to be. I think we are more than just trying to think about the facility needs of that's our primary purpose. But I think we also want to be cognizant of the fact that our community wants to use these facilities as well.
Thank you, Mr. Holst. And I think speaking as an assembly member, we are, and it's good that you bring up community schools, because that's definitely something that we're talking about right now and talked about last week. Last Wednesday when the school board met with the assembly. I think that the assembly, we are all very cognizant of the use of the schools by the community, and that's very important for us. But the assembly is also very cognizant that the core mission of the schools is the core thing that we need to be sure to fund. And so we have to be very focused on that core mission. And I see no other, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Along with you, it said we do take into account that the facilities are used for other reasons too, which is one of the reasons we bonded out to fix Adair Kennedy Park and to put a turf softball, baseball field. So we are aware, but yes, they do have their mission to educate the youth, but.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. think we can move on to the next topic then. Thank you so much, Ms. Kester.
Excellent. That was actually a great segue into the next topic, which is childcare in CBJ, Juneau School District facilities. You have in your packet a report from May, it was presented at this committee on May 17th, 2019. It's on page 10 of your report, and that is not dated. So scribble that in on your hard copy, and we will make sure the permanent record gets a date. But the purpose of this report is just to include work that previous committees did on the topic. The other near-term purpose of this agenda item is to speak to a effort on that AEYC is undertaking to provide childcare for our community. So a huge need for the community, huge priority for the assembly. And I'm going to tee this one up for Deputy Manager Barr, who will walk us through the childcare question.
Thank you, Ms. Kester, and thank you, Mr. Barr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So no secret, I think, to anyone here that we've been, the Assembly has been doing quite a bit of work on the childcare front for a number of years, mostly in partnership with AEYC, all sorts of programs that we could go into detail on. Long and short of it is that the Assembly funds to the tune of about $800,000 a year to subsidize really to stabilize that industry locally in Juneau. Also worth noting that the voters approved an additional $500,000 a year going into that sector last fall at the ballot. Childcare pretty important for lots of different reasons. Key quality indicator for kindergarten readiness. Big economic development factor. Lots of good reasons why we want childcare to be done well and in sufficient quantity in Juneau for the benefit of all of our residents and our children in schools. So with that said, AEYC recently received a $5 million congressionally designated funding appropriation thanks to Senator Murkowski. The objective of that appropriation is for AEYC to build or acquire space for a family services center and space for a childcare operation. Those two things together. Obviously, $5 million is not enough for a new build for those types of things in Juneau, but it is still a significant start to that effort. And I thought it was a good idea to bring it before this committee as a potential opportunity within the context of enrollment projections that this committee discussed at its last meeting as a potential opportunity to utilize some of that money or all of that money, perhaps in partnership with other funding, to do that work inside a facility that we already own. I know that would be challenging. No question there. We've certainly done work in the past to look at CBJ facilities, including school facilities, and to analyze whether or not we could fit childcare in, and that has not borne fruit in the past. But this is a new day and a new funding opportunity, so I thought it was worth bringing to your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Barr, and Mr. Barr or Ms. Kester, or Ms. Dr. Weiss. Did anyone want to speak to this report specifically and some of the conclusions of this report? If no one does, I do have one segment, a couple of segments, I think, that I could highlight. And we talked about one of them, and I don't think it was at this meeting, but it was at a recent meeting. Maybe it was at our pre-meeting, which is that because of the legal requirements for 0 to 3, those requirements, extra bathrooms and things like that, those requirements don't fit very well within a school context. So if there were childcare for 0 to 3, there would have to be some major renovations, and maybe you can't even have that coexisting with a regular school. So that's just one item that I think we talked about, and I think it's brought out in this report. I did also find on page 12 of the report, that bottom of the bottom of the first paragraph, highlighted in italics, there are classrooms that could be made available for additional pre-K programming in some schools with relocation of existing uses. And Dr. Weiss, can I assume that that's still true then today? This was obviously 4 years ago.
Yes, that is true. Of course, we currently house quite a few preschool programs. And we certainly have space. We're considering possibly even expanding by 1 classroom for next year. We're still doing some background research on that to see if it's possible, but yes. Preschool, we've conquered that, and our challenge in some sites is in opening a preschool classroom is because the enrollment will be close to the number of class. So our enrollment in a school determines, alongside the pupil teacher ratio that the board decides each spring, the number of teachers, the number of classrooms that we will offer. And sometimes when a school is close to enrollment, that number of classrooms will teeter from 1 year to the next, might be 12 one year, might be 13 the next. So when we establish a preschool program in a school, we run the risk of 1 year later having to try to relocate that preschool somewhere else because that classroom is needed for a regular K-12 classroom. So we're pretty particular about where we expand preschool for that reason. We'd like to try to have it not be a vulnerable site to that flip-flopping of the number of reg ed classrooms that might happen from year to year.
Yeah, that's very clarifying. Are there additional comments? I think this also really plays into at the discussion. I see Mr. Muldoon. Mr. Muldoon, sorry, I missed that.
No worries. Thank you, Chair Hale. I just had a brief question for Dr. Weiss in regards to that teeter-totter. I believe this last year we had 3 elementary schools, being Auk Bay, Mendenhall River, and Gastineau, change with the classrooms. Is that a big year? Is that an outlying year? Is that an average year? I'm just trying to understand, like, if we're trying to do more aspirational and planning style things, like what is a healthy baseline to consider in that vein? Thank you.
And I think, Mr. Muldoon, I'm assuming you mean changes once the school year started. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, so it happens a couple different times, which is another point that Mr. Muldoon brings up. Sometimes that change in the number of classrooms happens in the spring because we have a projected enrollment. We have the board making their final budget decisions that set that PTR. But then what happens in the fall is oftentimes kids don't show up quite in the same packages in the right place, same places or grade levels that we think. And so we sometimes have that swing happen in the spring and sometimes in the fall. So there's really 2 places in our cycle that number of classrooms can change. And I would say 3 to 5 could happen on an average year between both of those 2. So it's something that we pay attention to when we're looking at how to allocate resources or space.
Thank you. Mr. Holst.
I just want to, when we think about our elementary schools and I think in the public, there's this understanding that the student age is, the number of students in our school district is going down as our demographics change. And then why don't we have a school open? I think the way we've been doing this really reflects the community value that we have, that we want. People well before us wanted the elementary schools to be neighborhood based. So I think the approach that we have been going along is whereas as a little bit of space becomes available, making it available for something like pre-K makes a whole lot of sense versus another option, which would be you have 6 elementary schools. You could figure out a way to fit them all into 5 buildings. You would then cause a neighborhood to not have a school close to it. That would be, and then you would presumably use that building for something else. It could be pre-K. I just want us to, if we think about how we go about utilizing that space as it frees up, I just want us to hold in mind one of the way the distribution of our buildings started, which was to have them be close to the neighborhoods. And it may be that there's a point where we no longer can do that, but that's valuable. So I think and I'm not sure exactly what Mr. Barr was, what the options are with AEYC and the $5 million, but it would be, if it was able to be distributed, I don't know if that's possible, instead of one big building with 5 million, but to make the upgrades in 6 buildings so that we have this pre-K system closer to where people live, that could be really attractive, I think, to the community. But I don't even know if that's an option, if I may ask.
Mr. Barr, did you want to speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Chair Hale. I certainly understand Mr. Holst's the desire for distribution there. I think I've spoken with Ms. Scheibler, the AEYC's executive director, about this concept, and at least to start, AEYC is looking for a single space. I think there might be potential in the longer run for there to be a distributed model that sort of was like a hub and spoke sort of thing, but the hub would be the place that they will need to start.
Thanks. And I think that's important, especially as we move into the next item on the agenda, which is a look at the actual current space and the space analysis. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair Hale. You brought up a good point. The next agenda item is really a presentation from the school district in your packet about the space use currently. And I think it really does dovetail with the childcare. What is there room for other activities in these facilities? So I guess I would ask you to think of them as one agenda item and maybe come back to this conversation after Ms. Olin has presented those materials, and I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you very much. And I did want to say, which I should have said at the beginning, that we have until 1:30. We've deliberately made this meeting 1.5 hours long. And I just want to make sure everyone knows that. And if they can't stay, just let me know and we'll just do our best. Thanks. Ms. Olin. Thank the school district and Ms. Olin in particular for putting this information together for the committee. Thank you.
No, I can see it from hers, actually.
Yeah.
I know, I'm like, good afternoon. This is a compilation that my department with Stacy Polson, who's my administrative assistant, and myself put together with the help of our principals, going through our buildings to verify our space and the necessity of different areas that we use throughout our different areas that we have in our facilities. For Ock Bay, they currently have 20 classrooms available to them. They have 19 that they currently use as classrooms. They have 0 storage in there. They also are they have 1 rally room that they use. That rally room is used during the day as an intervention services area that students are pulled out into reading or math or whatever is needed in that case. And we do have an integrated pre-K there. They currently have 312 students there, and they have a rated capacity with the Uniform Building Code, which is the fire marshal capacity limits that we use in order to use that versus the deed capacity, as we want to adhere to our fire marshal so that our insurance and everything is under is acceptable and everything. And they are currently sitting at 92% of capacity at that rate. That does not include rally. When rally kids are there, they come in the afternoon after the school day is out. So they do attend that time. It does not also include, none of these figures include the students that come in for from home into our service providers such as SLP, PTs, or OTPs. So they come into the buildings during that time also. We have gone through all the sites, and I don't know if we want to go through one by one or if you just would prefer to read them. And if you have questions, I don't know what is easier for everyone. Gastineau currently has.
If I could just pause. So if anyone does have a question as we move through this, like I had a question written in my notes about the difference between uniform building code and deed capacity, and Ms. Olin already answered that by saying that the UBC is where the fire marshal wants us. But if anyone does have a question, please just let us know. And proceed, please.
Maybe pick a middle school and then we can do a high school or something like that. I'm doing them all.
Let's see here.
If you could go through quickly all of them, that'd be awesome for me. Just
Okay. All righty, we have Gastineau Elementary. They currently have 14 classrooms, 13 of them are being currently used. One of them has storage. They also have in their facility one rally room, one Head Start room, one Kinder Ready room, and one integrated pre-K. They are currently sitting at an 84% capacity limit based upon the uniform building codes and the square footage that we have on file with them. Glacier Valley currently has 21 classrooms, 21 of them are being filled. They have 0 storage. We have 1 rally room, 1 leap room, and those actually are not in rooms. Those are outside in the 2 extra modulars that we have out there, as we don't have any extra space within the actual facility for them to be utilized. And then we also have a Kinder Ready room and an integrated pre-K room. They are currently sitting at 81% of capacity at that. Harborview Elementary. This also houses TCLL, so they are part of this count along with Harborview Elementary students. So we have 26 classrooms, 26 of them are filled. We have 1 storage room, 1 rally room, 1 leap room, 1 Kinder Ready, and 1 integrated pre-K room. TCLL is mostly on the first floor. They are expanding actually into this, or actually they're on the first floor. They have a lower level and then a first floor and then a second floor. They're kind of different as they go down. They also have the commons areas and the kitchens that are used, and TCL utilizes the same space as Harborview as they utilize the different areas in that building.
Ms. Olin, would you tell us what TCLL is?
Tlingit culture and language literacy.
Thank you.
All right.
I just ask a question.
Yes, Ms. Gladchevsky.
Thank you so much. These, when you say 1 rally room, 1 leap room, did they used to be classrooms in there now, or they were separately for those things? Could they be classrooms? Or when you say there's 26 of 26, just in general for all these charts?
The rally classrooms cannot be converted back to a regular classroom, as they are currently under regulation by the Department of Health and Human Services to be childcare centers. And so in order to keep our childcare center status, we have to maintain them just as rally classrooms in the space that is abided by them. All of our rally classrooms do not have desks or anything of that nature in them. They have more tables and areas for the kids to play. The leap rooms usually at most of the facilities are utilized actually being, they are swapped out for a classroom during the day if this facility is short on space. Otherwise, they do have their own designated area, and those areas could be a classroom if needed.
And what does LEAP mean?
It's an after-school academic and social emotional program.
Super, thank you.
And just to clarify, so when you say 26 of 26, does that include rally? So is the rally and the leap room and the kinder ready room all in addition to 26? And they're all each one thing? Again, just trying to understand the whole nomenclature of your chart.
No, the 26 does include the rally rooms and the other areas, the kinder ready, the pre-K rooms. Those are all classroom spaces that are being utilized.
I see. So when you say, for example, for this one, 26 of 26 are being used, 1, 2, 3, 4, 22 are being used for regular classrooms and 4 are being used for other things, right? Is that, if I
Yes.
understand correctly?
Yes.
Rally, leap, kindergarten. Okay, great. Thank you.
Great question. Thank you.
I would also like to mention that TCLL is actually expanding next year, and they will be bringing in middle school, so 6th through 8th. And so there will be other classrooms being utilized for that. And we are actually in the stages of trying to design where they will be housed at, as our classrooms are all full at this level. So we're trying to take the map and use it the best we can with that.
I wanted to add just one point of clarification from the last question. When you see integrated pre-K here, that is a classroom. It's a required classroom. It's how we serve our students with special needs. So that's different than Kinder Ready or LEAP or Rally. It is one of our federally mandated programs that we run.
Thank you.
All right.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Isn't there another level beside,
Yeah.
behind the lower level?
There-
Oh,
It's on the next page.
no, that's the second floor.
The basement.
And after Madam Mayor, Ms. Gladysewski.
Yep, I'm saying, isn't there another lower level, beneath the lower level, because I remember they used to.
The
do
lower-
Library cafeteria.
Yeah, the lower levels here. This is the first floor and this is the second floor.
No, I'm saying, isn't there a level beneath the lower level? I'm vaguely remembering there used to be
Yeah.
armory,
Have a rifle range.
the armory and gun range.
Yeah, that is not an operational level. any longer.
Not that I'm aware of. I don't even know.
Okay, so I'm just making sure my memory is correct.
And Ms. Gladysewski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My hand was left over, but I appreciate the clarification that Dr. Weiss just said. So those three, if you go back to the front page, 3 used to be classrooms or could have been classrooms and could be classrooms again, but 1, and I forgot the names because not in school speak. If you go back to the 1 is you have to have that space. You could never make that a classroom.
And that's the integrated pre-K.
There you go.
No.
Thank you.
No, that's the, yep. Okay, super. Thank you. Continuing, Ms. Olin, thank you.
All right, Mendenhall River. Mendenhall River currently has 21 classrooms, 21 of them are filled. We have 0 storage there. We have 2 Head Start classrooms there, 1 Kinder Ready program there. And we have 2 integrated pre-Ks in that facility. They are currently sitting at a 62% capacity limit of that building. And they house the majority of a lot of our special education areas in regards to our younger population in regards to pre-K and our Head Start Kinder Ready. So their playground has been utilized and upgraded to match that for them at that facility. And that is also an area that we have a majority of our motor pools, we call them, which is actually OTPT rooms, where buses will bring in the younger students that are coming from different facilities, such as other schools within the community or within their own house, and bring them to school for services and taking them back home. So there are actual areas in there that are designated for that also, that we are required to do per federal law.
Yeah, the only other example that this brings to mind with specifically Mendenhall River Community School, but it happens in a variety of our schools. A classroom space has been converted into a motor, what we refer to as a motor room. So for our students with high needs, they often need sensory support during the day. That's written into their IEPs, their individual education program. And so we have in those rooms, we have swings as an example, an OT swing, and a variety of tools that they used for sensory support for those students. And that's because we have so many students with IEPs at Minnehaha River. We have a classroom that's dedicated, that's been converted into a motor room. We have a similar one at Harborview. And so that's just another use of our space.
Thank you.
Let me just, sorry, I'm not raising my hand because you can't see me. Can I ask a question, Madam Chair?
Please.
Dr. Weiss, the motor room, that's not on here. It says 2 Head Start, 1 Kinder Ready, 2 integrated pre-K. Is that a special kind of room that's not on here?
It is not listed on that list, correct? It's shaded as the pink SPED area, SPED for special education. So it's in the diagram. It's not accounted for in that list of classrooms there on the left.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Ms. Gladishevsky or Mr. Muldoon, please pipe up if you're not being noticed, because I can't see you right now. Ms. Olin.
Okay. Next on our list is going to be Coctaguhuheen Elementary. They currently have 24 classroom spaces, 23 of them are being utilized. They have 0 storage. They have 1 leap room and 1 integrated pre-K room, and they are sitting at 63% of capacity. Moving on into our middle schools, Dazanta Kahini Middle School currently has 33 classrooms. All 33 are being utilized. We currently have 0 storage there. This also houses our IT department, and it's actually labeled as a tech lab on the first floor, kind of on the bottom right. It's green over there. That is our actual IT department. So we have utilized 2 of those classrooms, and they're not part of the main count anymore. We've actually taken them out of that 30, or there was 35, now there's 33, if that makes sense. They are sitting at 90% capacity at the moment, and they have a new roof, which we love. Let's see, Floyd Dryden Middle School, they have 27 classrooms of 28 being utilized. They currently have 0 storage, and they do have 1 BAM room, which is an after-school program. BAM.
I'll come up with what BAM stands for. Bodies and Minds. Thank you. I couldn't get behavior out of my mind, and I knew it. Bodies and Minds, and that's a collaborative with CVJ after school programming for middle school students. It's an amazing program.
Madam Mayor.
So is the BAM room the 28 out of any 28, or is that counted differently?
It is counted differently, as it can't be utilized as a classroom, as it is not up to the size to fit enough students in it. So they utilize it outside of it.
And Ms. Olin, I have a question about the 113% capacity for this school. So if the UBC is what the fire marshal relies upon and not deed, how are we at 113%?
This is 113%. We have modulars, 3 modulars. On the side over here, it says health, and then there's a rally, and then there's a white one out there. So we do have students that go out to the modulars during the day also. And then through our movement through different programs and different areas, they don't meet capacity every day, or even, I don't believe I've ever seen them at capacity, as we have students who are not there, and our capacity fluctuates daily, or attendance does too. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thunder Mountain, we're moving on to high schools. Thunder Mountain currently has 32 classrooms, 31 of them are being utilized. We do have 1 storage classroom there. Our student services department is located here. They are located on the 2nd floor, kind of in the back wing part. there. And so they are sitting at 71% capacity. And they have the auditorium, and so their range or their facility footprint is a lot larger than the rest of our facilities in regards to that, as they have the auditorium and their gymnasium and ox gym, and both high schools are this way also. We also have our transitions program that is housed there, which is actually our post-secondary area for our special education students that are after high school. And they are housed in Thunder Mountain also as part of the Student Services Department.
Would you repeat that? What is that last group that you're talking about?
So it's, we call it transitions program through IDEA federal law. We support students who qualify from 18 to 22.
Okay.
And so that is where we house that program, is in a classroom at Thunder Mountain. You'll also notice on the second floor at Thunder Mountain, we have 2 classrooms and what I wouldn't call a classroom. It's a meeting room really, there on the end. And those 3 we use to house our student services department because we don't have room for them at the downtown office. And so those are noted there, but they are not, and there's a little asterisk in your list on the legend, but those are not counted, obviously, when you do the percentage. To do the percentage, we just did capacity by number of students.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you. In regards to those student services employees, how many are there?
We have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 5 employees in one room and 3 employees in the other one.
So total.
That's their office space. Yep. 1, yes.
And 9 if there is a director.
Yes, 9 if there was a director, besides Bridget being 2 people at once.
Thank you. Moving on.
Moving on, we have Juneau Douglas High School. Juneau Douglas currently has 44 classrooms. 36 of them are being utilized with JDHS. They do have 1 storage. 4 of those rooms are being for computer labs. 1 is our JSD training room that we have. We have 7 rooms that are currently being utilized by the charter school. And we have 1 teen health room that we have down on the first floor. They are currently at 61% capacity. And they have the same in regards to the auditorium and the main gyms and ox gyms that included in their square footages. So that does bump up our square footage for the high school in this area also. And
Can you, either of you talk about, in terms of the Juneau Charter School, kind of blocked out, occupying those rooms, does the Juneau Charter School, how does the school district, how does the financial, how do finances work? Because the Juneau Charter School obviously is getting some funding, but how does that work with the finances for the high school overall?
So I'll add a few things and then Cassie can jump in, but generally it is its own entity. So charter school finances and JDHS finances are completely separate. So there's a distinct line between those 2 programs. Funding for charter school is generated through their charter school status and their enrollment. And those funds come into the district and fund straight through those expenses like staffing and really every cost associated with that. They lease that part of the building. We moved them. They were in a pretty dilapidated building downtown for a number of years. And we squished a lot of things together to make room for them so that they could have a quality environment. What have I missed about financing?
there's a 4%.
Oh, the only thing additional to that is an indirect, because we run all of their funds through our finance department and payroll and all of that. And so there's a 4% indirect, basically, like there is on a variety of grants.
I think the real question I was looking for is that they lease from the school district, Madam Mayor.
Poke a little further, how much do they pay for their lease?
130,000 currently, and they will be paying 150,000 next year. As that lease hasn't been
And a
updated.
follow-up, if I may.
Yeah.
How many kids are in charter school?
Currently, right now, there are 76. There were 80.8 at count time, and they are estimated to have 88 next year. And they are a K-8 school also.
And how many classrooms did they use?
They utilize 7.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Moving on.
All right, the last school we have is Murray Drake, and this houses Yakusuke Dakahiti High School. This is for the whole facility, as our principal in charge of Yakusuke and Montessori Borealis. When she counted them, we count them every classroom available in the whole Murray Drake. So there are currently 27 classrooms available there. 20 of them are being utilized. 2 of them has storage. 2 of them are being utilized by Homebridge. And we also, and I just realized that we have 2 of them that are one is being utilized, another classroom is being utilized by Juneau Douglas High School as a engineering department, I believe, engineering classroom on the bottom floor also. I just noticed I left that one off there. I apologize. And then the entire second floor is currently all of Montessori's program. And then in the basement is our storage records rooms, and then also our JSD server farm server. Our mainframe is housed down there. And that is the main line for all of our internet services that we have for the district. And I believe that's everything there. Currently, Montessori Borealis has roughly 172 students currently. They are slated to have 180 next year. And Yakusuke currently has 72 students. This does include students from Juneau Youth Services that attend also. And there are currently roughly 70 students there, as Juneau Youth Services fluctuates as kids come and go there. And so their numbers, but they stay right around 70 normally. And I believe that's everything for that.
Can I ask a
Ms.
question?
Waliszewski, yes, please.
Thank you,
I
Madam.
can't
Chair.
see your hand, actually. Thank you. Ms.
Okay,
Henry.
perfect. Regarding the students in Montessori, you said there's 172. You said for the charter school, there were 88 kids, and they used roughly 88 kids in some year, you said, and they used 7 classrooms. The 172 in Montessori use how many classrooms?
I believe it's 13, but yeah, 13 classrooms. And they do combined classrooms is how their classrooms do work and utilize. So they have like pre-K 1, 2, they have 1, 2, 3. So they have, the way Montessori works is there is a grade span within those classrooms.
Right, they do combination grade levels for sure. The kindergarten is only pre-K and kindergarten. That's one of our other preschool offerings. But it is pre-K and K.
What grade levels are included in Montessori Borealis?
Great, pre-K through 8. Good
Pre-K
question.
through 8.
8. Mhm.
And is Montessori Borealis similar to the charter school in that it's privately run, or it's
Nope.
run by the schools?
It's
as-
an optional program that we run similar to TCLL, our school within a school at Harborview. So those are different.
And just roughly, it does seem like they use more classrooms than what we've seen in some of the other schools. Roughly, are the costs comparable for Montessori Borealis as the other schools and classrooms? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
There.
Are there any other questions or comments from committee members? Mr.
Well,
Holst.
just Dr. Weiss, next year Montessori is no longer a school within a school officially. Is that correct?
In order, there,
Oh, it's a minor point. But
Yeah, it's, I
Yeah.
think, too technical for our purposes here.
they're
Yeah,
considered an
it's-
alternative school
Yeah.
through the foundation formula.
Okay, thank you. Ms.
Yeah.
Sorensen, did you have your mic on? Did you have something to say?
Yes, I just wanted to point out that, you know, when we meet with parents and school administrators, you know, the constant drumbeat from them is always class size. And while we see like our student numbers declining in these buildings, it's important to remember that, you know, it was not unusual 20 years ago to have 32 students in a 5th grade. And now we try to keep it down to 26 to 28. It was not unusual to have 25 to 28 students in a 2nd grade. And now we try to keep it down to, you know, somewhere in the neighborhood of under 23. So in terms of what parents are looking for in their schools, they're really looking for classrooms that have fewer students in them so that their students get more quality time with their teachers. So while our school capacities represent the ability to put significantly more desks in each classroom, that is not what parents are looking for.
I greatly appreciate that point, and having substitute taught at JDHS before Thunder Mountain was built, I really didn't know how teachers did it. Madam Mayor.
Thank you. My 5th grade class had 40 kids in it, just so you know. Along those lines, and I don't mean this to sound bad in any way, shape, or form. It seems to me that the charter school and Montessori are getting a heck of a deal. If I have you right, you have 76 kids in charter with 10 classrooms. Or 7 classrooms, so that's 10 per classroom, and you just said 26, 24-ish. And Montessori is roughly about 13 kids, so why are we giving them so much room if the other classes are?
Part of
full?
it for the charter school is they're a K-8 program inside of a high school building. So we have a half of a wing in the first floor, which is really down a level when you walk into JDHS. And so we do try to separate those students when we can so that we don't have little 1st graders mixing with our olders. And so that is a wing, basically. It's from one, just as you come down the main stairs where the totem pole is. If you come down the stairs to visualize it and take a left, then that wing is charter school. To the right is JDHS. So that's part of it, is that's the space that was available there. We actually took a classroom at the time and moved it into an office because they have to have a front office with copy machines and admin assistants and such. And so one of the classrooms was turned into that right at the base of the stairs. But then we have a big double door, and then charter school is served that direction.
Thank you. That was a good question. And I think it's a good example of what the school board's been telling us about being creative about space in the schools. I also think it's a really perfect segue back to the combination, as Ms. Kester mentioned. We talked about childcare in Juneau School District facilities, and now we've talked about the current use and the space analysis. This was incredibly helpful, Ms. Olin. So thank you, and thank your staff for putting this together. So when we have talked to Ms. Scheibler, she's talked about needing like just having the, you know, a dispersed classroom here and here and there won't really work for her needs, and particularly won't work because we know that 0 to 3 doesn't really fit within a school context. You know, they need different structure. So this just really opens my eyes that I think the question that we kind of arrived at when we talked with Ms. Scheibler is there some wing of a school that might be able to be modified to fit the AEYS needs for this building rather than them having to build a new building. And Mr. Barr, did you have anything to add to what I've just kind of laid out, or do I have anything wrong?
Thank you, Chair Hale. I think the only thing that I would add is that while you know, the report in your packet and all the comments around it being quite difficult to convert a space to be suitable for 0 to 3-year-olds are accurate, it is doable. We have childcare operators throughout the community that do that with leased commercial space. And they are generally sole proprietors, and we unquestionably have more resources and expertise than they do when they accomplish that. So I would just say that that it is definitely a challenge, but it is a challenge that I think we could overcome if we had the space available and set ourselves to it.
Thank you, Mr. Barr. Does anyone have any comments or thoughts on that sort of continuing conversation about whether the AEYS facility might be able to fit in the schools? I think it's really, at this point, it's just really good food for thought. And I really appreciate seeing, you know, what the school district has done with Marie Drake, which used to be a middle school. And then, you know, taking that wing for the charter school. I appreciate seeing that because it just kind of opens up, I feel like it does open up that conversation in terms of AEYS as a potential location. AEYC, the mayor scribbles. I knew I had something wrong. And I don't know if anyone has anything to add to that before we move on.
Chair
Okay.
Hale, Chair Hale, just if I may, to Mr. Barr, has AYC determined what would be the ideal capacity, like how much space they, because I don't know what percentage of the 0 to 3 market they anticipate that they would accommodate. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you through the chair. Mr. Holst, I have seen some plans that they have drawn up, architectural renderings. It's very early for them from a conceptual design point of view. I can get you those. I don't recall the exact amount of square footage off the top of my head, but I can connect you with those.
And AEYC is also, you know, their intent, it's a bit like the new Teal Street Center. So their intent is that there would be, it's not just that they're trying to build a big childcare facility for 0 to 3. They're also, they'd have their administrative offices, and they would have also be sort of co-located with people who train childcare providers, for example. So there would be more than just a big childcare facility. I think is their intent. Excellent. Thank you. Ms. Kester, would you like to take us to the final memo in the packet?
Thank you. All right. I was deep in my thought and the wheels were turning. So on page 31 of the packet is a memo that really the group worked on together. We've had a couple of really productive pre-meetings with Dr. Weiss, with Chair Sorensen, Chair Hale. So thank you for that. And also Ms. Olin. So I know Chair Hale wanted to spend some time talking about what the goals of this committee are for 2023. So, you know, thinking really near term, we're not gonna, you know, change the world or make big decisions, but there's a lot of thought work that can be done. And so if you want to review that list of goals, I think it's a good launching point for some conversation with the committee, and ideally we'll tweak those, change those, agree on those, or agree that we need to come back at next meeting with different goals.
So we'll just give people a couple minutes to take a look at that bulleted list, and then we can raise issues or questions. And my goal is, from this meeting is to actually to be able to report at tonight's assembly meeting in my report, what the goals are that this committee has agreed upon back to the assembly. So that we've kind of, we've kind of bumped along as we've sort of gotten our feet under us. And so I want to be able to report back. This is what we plan on doing in this group. Mr. Holst.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hill. And one of the items here is the strategy for addressing declining enrollment to the Assembly and School Board. And I get this as a school board member, I get this question a lot in the community. People see, 200 less students or 300 less students over time, a large number. And it's just really, really hard for them to understand, well, why aren't we closing schools, right? And it's been that way ever since I've been on the school board. And I think one of the goals here that I'd like to have as a community, this group, is to really help the community to understand that there's a couple factors going on. One is the way our schools are funded favors generally fewer children per building, because smaller buildings have better educational outcomes. So that's a factor for us. And I know the Assembly's looked at that as well. I think you also see that just in the short time that I've been on the school board, 9 years, we saw the need for our charter school with bad facilities, and then we found a way to put them in the building. We had the administration, which is in its current building. Buildings, right? But spread around, but it used to rent buildings, across the hall. And we've all pretty much, except for a few storage facilities, been able to consolidate all of our administration onto non-rented facilities in there. So I know it's hard for folks to understand, how is it that there is an empty space? We've been proactive about inviting in Head Start, for example, at no cost to them, which allows for an important program to have a free location to operate for our community in our building, not to mention the additional non-required early education. And then of course, Ms. Sorensen's point, and she has been teaching for a long time, is that I don't know how we managed it, Mayor, to get through the Juneau School District with big classrooms, but we did. But we also have fewer kids per classroom. So there's just a bunch of factors that make it, it's hard to explain to some folks quickly. Why is it that there isn't a lot of extra space in our buildings? And there's not a lot of extra space. I think we've identified some small spaces, but it is definitely the interest of the school district to utilize the space, maximize the space. We know that I can speak for myself. We live in a community that supports our schools tremendously, and we want to be using them really efficiently. But I think part of this conversation is, I'm talking too long, but I just want us to maybe a sub goal is just better understanding in our community about how the schools are utilized and why we don't have this extra space.
Mr. Holst, as you've been talking, I've been trying to figure out how we would formulate a sub bullet to that effect, which is in a sense, a communication, about, and frankly, I'm somewhat ashamed to admit, but I just didn't really, because I don't have children of my own. I have stepchildren, but I don't have children of my own that have gone through the school system. I didn't have an understanding of how Marie Drake has been repurposed. And so that's really good. I mean, I knew Yahusk was there, but that's really good to understand that. And so maybe we have something about communication. And I see that, I believe Mr. Muldoon has his hand raised. Mr. Muldoon.
And I just want to align myself with Mr. Hull's comments and yours as well, that I'd like to thank staff. I think they've given us a really good base for facility usage and where we're at. We're going to have to tie that, with financials and there is a resolve amongst this group to really nail that communication aspect down. And so
Thank you, Mr. Muldoon. I think we have lost you. But I agree. Thank you. Okay, so Ms. Kester, I don't know if there is anything succinct that we could say there about communication as a sub bullet under that third bullet.
Chair Hill, I think that's an excellent point. And because the goals really should be at the forefront of our work this year, how about you and I, with the help of Chair Sorensen, Dr. Weiss, and Ms. Olin, take a stab at that and then bring it back to this committee? Because again, I think starting every meeting with those goals in mind isn't a bad place. So we can work on that.
That is terrific. And Madam Mayor.
I'll be the bad person in the room. I would appreciate seeing the goals, but I'm not sure if that's the goal and should be one of the goals of this committee. I appreciate everything that was said, but I see that falls under the role of the school board, not necessarily a joint facilities committee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I see that point as well. And Mr. Muldoon, I see, is back. And Mr. Muldoon, thank you for your comments. I think we got them right before we lost you. So I don't know if you have anything to add further. Okay, I see a thumbs up. Okay, we will indeed put these goals at the top of the agenda, and I'm not seeing further comments. Does anyone have anything to add? We do have on the agenda public participation. However, the member of the public that has just joined may be related to one of the people on the committee. And I don't see a hand up to participate. So do we have any further comments? And our next meeting time is May 8th, and we've actually selected that date in close consultation with Dr. Weiss, so we don't get in the middle of innumerable school things that are going on. I don't see anything further from committee members, so at 1:24 p.m. this meeting is adjourned.